Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and this is part 9 of my Mean Streets of Gadgetzan card review. This time around, I think I've got 8 new cards, and quite a bit to say about them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the first one, which is the new Priest Legendary Minion, Raza the Chained. This guy has been receiving a lot of acclaim on the internet. When he was revealed, I've seen a ton of positive reactions from pro players and just the community in general, citing him as just being the first good Priest Legendary and really overpowered and just so much late game value. But I'm not quite as convinced that Raza the Chained is going to be an awesome card. So let's go ahead and talk about why that is. He's a 5-mana minion, 5/5 stats. All that's fine. That's pretty good stats for the cost. And he has a battle cry. If your deck has no duplicates, your hero power costs 0 mana this game. So, of course, that's the Reno Jackson / Kazakis style condition where you have to build that Reno deck, or the Kazakis style deck, the new tri-class card that has a similar condition. So, this is going to fit in pretty much only that kind of deck. So, that's one limitation of this card right away, is that he's chained, if you will, to a specific deck archetype. So he's not going to be played outside of that, because otherwise he's just a 5/5 minion, which is not very exciting for 5 mana, obviously. So that's problem number one for this card that somehow a lot of people just overlooked. I mean, I do think that Reno / Kazakis Priest is obviously going to be an archetype when Gadgetzan is released, and probably a good one at that. So it's not like the biggest downside ever, but it is an issue with this card moving forward, especially over the lifetime of the card. Who knows if that will always be good, especially once Reno rotates out sometimes early next year. Raza could get much weaker just because that archetype gets weaker. So that's one problem for me. The next problem, and the one that, I don't know, I guess nobody's really discussing, and the fact that it seems like everybody's missing it, so I almost feel like maybe I'm looking at this incorrectly. But this battle cry, I'm not even sure it's good. Let me qualify that statement. It's good. It's strong. It lasts an entire game as soon as you play him. So it's a permanent effect that has the potential for value. It does something positive. It's good. But some people are talking about this battle cry. Essentially the effect from the battle cry, the fact that your hero power goes to 0 mana. Some people are talking about that like it's just the most insane thing ever and it's going to win you games, which is crazy to me, because the thing about hero powers, particularly in the late game and in control style decks, is that usually they're free anyway. A vast majority of turns, your hero power functionally costs 0 mana. Yes, it says 2 on the top for the mana cost. Yes, when you use it, 2 mana disappears from your pool. So yes, it costs 2 mana, but often you have spare mana in late game turns anyway. So that 2 mana is just going to rot. It's just going to be worthless anyway. So it's essentially like your hero power is free. If you play an 8-drop, you have a free hero power. If you play a 6/7-drop and you don't have anything else to do with your mana, you have a free hero power. Now granted, there are those turns where you do want to spend your full 10 mana, and you can't if you want a hero power. So there are going to be the occasional turns here and there where Raza does actually merit or earn you an extra hero power because you wanted to spend a full 10 mana. But there are so many turns in control style decks where it's like, play a 7-drop, hero power. Play a 6-drop, hero power. And that mana is just free. It's totally free. It says 2, but it didn't cost you anything because you didn't have an alternative play or an alternative way to spend that mana in the first place. So in my mind, there might only be something like 3 to 5 turns throughout the course of a game where Raza the Chained actually earns you a free hero power that you wouldn't otherwise have already had. Now, obviously, if you play this right on turn 5, there's a good chance turn 6, 7, 8, 9, up, through up to turn 10 as you continue to gain on your base mana, there's a good chance he will earn you a free hero power on those turns, because you're probably going to have a 6 mana play on turn 6. So now you can hero power for free on top of that. Same thing on 7, 8, etc. So There will certainly be instances, if you play this on curve, where he nets you another 4 or 5 extra hero powers. But then after that point, I think there's probably 3 to 5 more total. So if you played this exactly on turn 5 to get your hero power cost reduced right away, I would say that 90% of the time, you're going to see somewhere between 6 to 10 extra hero powers throughout the course of a game, throughout the remainder of a game. When I say extra, what I mean by that is instances where you were able to play a hero power for 0 mana, or if you didn't have this card, you wouldn't have been able to hero power otherwise. So sort of the bonus free extra ones. Now that's an estimation. It'd take a lot of data and watching a lot of games, and it would obviously depend on the kind of deck as well. So this is clearly a guess, but it's just my instinct and my perception. So if you get something like 6 to 10 extra hero powers out of that guy, at a base priest hero power, that's essentially a heal for 12 to 20. And maybe less, maybe something like 8 to 20 is the real range on Raza, because some games don't last another 10, 15 turns. Sometimes you would lose the game on turn 7, or you win the game on turn 8. So I would say that my guess for how much healing this provides is somewhere between 8 and 20 health. Maybe 12 and 20 health. Something like that. Which is clearly a lot, but it's not as much as Reno Jackson can provide. It's really not that much more than something like an Antique Heal Bot most of the time. Plus, this has a disadvantage compared to a card like Antique Heal Bot, in that these heals only come 2 per turn. Antique Heal Bot gives you that instant boost of 8 health, right? So, yeah, the stats are better. Yeah, there's more health, but it's actually kind of a similar card in many ways to Antique Heal Bot. Now, obviously, there's tons of qualifications. You can use your free hero powers to heal minions. I get it. It's not a direct comparison, but that's one way to think about this card and kind of put it in a context of an obviously very good card. Antique Heal Bot's a great card, but it's not like an all-out game-winning legendary card, which is what some people are exclaiming Raza the Chained to be. Now, another thing I haven't discussed with this card is combo potential. Obviously, yes, there are all kinds of crazy combos you can do with this card. It's been confirmed that if you change or upgrade your hero power, this effect still sticks, even if it happens after you play Raza. So it's guaranteed to last the rest of the game no matter what happens to your hero power. So yeah, you can play Major Domo Executus, get Ragnaros, and shoot 8 damage balls out for free for the rest of the game, right? That's the thing that can happen. You can Justicar True Heart and get a 4 health heal. You can go Shadow Priest and start hitting people for 3 damage per turn if you want for free. All of that can happen. You can get Warrior Hero Power from Sir Finley Murgleton and armor up for free every turn, right? There's tons of possibilities. You can even do some crazy Inspire stuff, right? A card like Nexus Champion Sarad might get better because you could play him on turn 6 and instantly hero power for free after playing Raza the Chained. There's even some crazy combos where you get like Mage Hero Power and Koldara Drake and Raza the Chained, and you just infinite ping the enemy's face for lethal. I know that those possibilities exist, but those are essentially what I call like dream combos. They take a lot of setup, particularly like the Koldara Drake one, because that's got all kinds of RNG mixed in as well. But even the more predictable ones like Justicar True Heart and the Inspire effects, those take a lot of setup in multiple cards, and you never know when you're going to draw Justicar, so it's sort of unreliable to count on those to make huge swings in the game. And still, it comes down to that fact that a lot of times you have 2 spare mana anyway, so is it really doing anything extra that it wouldn't otherwise be doing? So ultimately, yeah, there's some cool combo potential. Yeah, there's tons of like tempo/value potential in Raza the Chained. He's got really cool artwork. I'll give him that. It's one of the coolest looking designs on a card. So there's a lot of positives here. This is a good card. I'm not saying it's a bad card. It's good. It's just not over the top crazy like some people are saying. This is a very reasonable legendary that will initially see some play in Kazaka style decks, but I think that you'll see this fall out of the meta pretty shortly thereafter. This is going to be one of those disappointing cards that people realized doesn't actually pay off all that much, all that often. But again, like I always say, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this is a good card. I'd love to play it. I'd love to play Priest in particular, So the more good cards Priest gets, the better. So let's wish Raza the Chained some good luck out there on the ladder. I'd certainly like to see this card in play. So let's go ahead and move on to the next card up for review. This is a Mage minion, the Cabal Lackey. It's a 1-mana minion. It's 2/1 in stats. And it has a stupidly good battle cry. The next secret you play this turn costs 0. So this is an instant infusion of tempo in the early game. It's, first off, a minion that trades up pretty well as a 2/1. That's the most desirable base 1-mana minion health total other than the 1/3s that scale up like Mana Worm and Tumultrog, of course. If you can't get that, 2/1 is often good. Yes, your opponents can ping it off, but it also threatens things like 3/2s. So a fine stat allocation for a 1-drop. It's pretty aggressively stanced, so it fits in higher tempo aggressive decks, which is nice. And this battle cry is just great for Mage, right? So it's a 3-mana tempo infusion with Cabal Lackey, because of course Mage secrets cost 3 mana. The problem is, of course, not all Mage secrets are actually all that good at contesting the board or influencing the board instantly. There's things like Mirror Entity, of course, but Mirror Entity this early in the game is not often great, just because if your opponent does play a minion, it's probably going to be a small minion, and you don't want to, even though it's totally free from a tempo standpoint, it's still wasting a card on a smaller minion. So there is some downside there, but of course it's a free secret, and in things like Tempo Mage in particular, that likes to play a lot of spells very rapidly, this could help you do that, right? This is essentially allowing you to develop a body, but also get out another very cheap spell that would otherwise be pretty expensive, which is nice. So there's some synergies there with all the different spell synergies Mage has access to. So high tempo, a lot of synergies. Also, I mean, it looks like Secret Mage is going to be more of a thing coming up, just because there have been a few secret synergy cards introduced in this expansion, and there's actually a couple in Karazhan as well, or at least one in Karazhan that seems pretty good, especially its early game minion. Medivh's Valet, I guess, is the card. So there's a lot coming together. A lot of puzzle pieces seem to be fitting in here, and I think that means Cabal Lackey is going to be a pretty awesome card in Mages that run secrets. It's got everything it needs to be very, very good. That's just an awesome battle cry. Super high tempo, really, really, really strong. So Cabal Lackey, very, very good card. So let's move on to another card that's going to work in that secret synergy style deck that I think everybody's dreaming up for Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. This time around, it's the new secret Potion of Polymorph. I don't really know how a potion can be a secret. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But whatever, naming conventions aside, this is a secret that after your opponent plays a minion, you transform it into a 1/1 sheep. So sort of the opposite of Mirror Entity. Instead of getting your own awesome minion, copying your opponent's and negating that minion, this one kind of just transforms it into a sheep. This is clearly a powerful card at its base level, right? If you can turn a Ragnaros into a sheep or a Tyrian Forging into a sheep, that's going to be a pretty powerful thing. The problem, of course, with cards like this and secrets that are reactive to your opponent's plays in general is that you don't really necessarily know what they're going to play. So, yeah, if it's a Paladin going into turn 8, there's a good chance you might hit that Tyrian Forging. If it's a Shaman going into turn 4, you might hit that 4-mana 7/7. There are a lot of predictable plays here where you can definitely influence your opponent's line of play. So, for instance, they might be scared to play Tyrian Forging on turn 8 and sit on it. So that actually has some value just as sort of a way to dissuade your opponents from doing things you don't want to do. So just the fact that this card exists, even if you're not necessarily playing it, just the fear of Potion of Polymorph, if this does become a commonly played card in secret style decks, that's going to change people's plays and make all the other secrets a little bit scarier and more threatening as well. So that's a nice side effect of a card like this merely existing. In practice, I don't know that it's going to be consistent enough to work. There's going to be those times where it hits a really bad minion and you feel like you wasted 3 mana. That said, of course, if it comes up something like Cabal Lackey, if it's totally free and you have enough card draw in your deck, you really maybe wouldn't even care if this hit, the Tunnel Trog or the Totem Golem or something. That would be a pretty substantial play. Of course, it's really good when you have the mana to ping off the sheep as well. So Cabal Lackey into a 1/1, the 1/1 would kill your Cabal Lackey or threaten your smaller minions. So that can be an issue, sometimes leaving that sheep around. But Mage clearly has plenty of ways to ping off 1 health minions between Arcane Missiles and Flame Wakers and the hero power. So that's not too much of a risk. But, on average, what's the typical minion this is going to catch, right? I'd say the average minion stats in Hearthstone are something like a 4/4, just because you've got a lot of small minions, but some big minions too. So you throw all that into a pot and you pull at the average, and I would say it's something like a 4/4 or a 5/5. So that means you're going to turn, on average, right, something like a 4/4 or 5/5 into a 1/1. So, it deals 4 damage, deals 5 damage. It's an attack debuff. For 3 mana, that's enough value. It's clearly just as good as the actual Polymorph, which is a playable spell for 4 mana. So that one you're kind of paying a penalty now, it seems like, to have it targeted and be more reliable. So I think Polymorph is still better than Potion of Polymorph just because it's consistent and predictable and targetable. But that doesn't necessarily mean Potion of Polymorph is a bad card. I think it's probably average. There's going to be times where it comes off of other spells too, like the Kabbalist Tome and all these other things that generate spells, Babbling Book. So you're not going to be sad to see Potion of Polymorph, but I don't know that this will actually make the cut in constructed deck lists, just because I think it's probably too unpredictable, a little bit too much RNG, or at least not RNG, but your opponent can play around it to some extent. So a good card to have around, but probably not a card that makes the cut in a ton of decks, if I have to make a guess. Moving on to another one. This time around, it's the Warlock minion Seadevil Stinger. It's a Warlock Murloc. It's a 4 mana 4/2, and it has a battle cry. The next Murloc you play this turn costs health instead of mana. So this is a neat little card, I guess. First off, the stats are pretty bad for a 4-cost minion. Only 2 health is clearly very, very susceptible to trades from smaller cost minions. So this is a thing that's not likely going to live all that easily. But I think the idea here is you can combo out your Seadevil Stinger with something like a Murloc War Leader, and suddenly it gets a buff that makes it a much, much more threatening minion. That's a very high tempo play as well, right? Because you can essentially spend that 3 mana of the Murloc War Leader for free if you play the Seadevil Stinger. So I think Blizzard's idea here is that this is going to help a deck like Murloc Warlock, which isn't currently a thing, but could be an aggressive Murloc Warlock deck. It's going to help that kind of deck really unload its hand really, really fast, and that's perfect for Warlock, of course, because they have Life Tap, which helps you refill that hand. So this is a card that sort of synergizes with the Warlock hero power in many ways, and of course, if you're playing a hyper-aggressive deck that wants to really, really hit the board fast and just overrun your opponents, then you don't typically care about your health. It's more about tempo and just loading up with stuff and making that wide board very early. So this card encourages that. Like, yeah, it's going to cost you 3 health to play it, but who cares, because the game's going to be over before that health matters anyway. So this card, by design is pretty cool. It fits a certain kind of archetype. It's that zoo Murloc that doesn't exist right now necessarily, but it might have the tools to do so in the near future. So I don't know. I think the biggest problem with this card is the cost. Like, it's a little slow. In that kind of deck, you're going to want to have most of your stuff out earlier. Turns 1, 2, and 3, you want to load up the board, and you may not really have much left by turn 4. Particularly expensive Murlocs. So often you're going to have like a 1 mana minion or a 1 mana Murloc left, or no Murlocs left when you come around to turn 4. Or you're going to life tap into this off the top of your deck and it's going to be useless. So there are some downsides despite the cool design. I suspect it won't actually be all that good in practice in actual games. Plus, of course, Murloc Warlock is not a thing right now, and I don't know that it's going to be a thing. So this feels like a very specific targeted card for a kind of deck that currently doesn't exist and doesn't sound all that great. So yes, a cool design, Not inherently bad just because it does do something unique and relatively powerful, but just not a card that fits very well into Hearthstone as we know it today. So I suspect pretty weak card that does not see very much play. Let's move on to another Warlock card. This time around, it's the Fel Fire Potion. 6 mana spell. Deal 5 damage to all characters. So this is Ysera Awakens. The Ysera Draw a Dream card. But it's 6 mana instead of 2 mana. And I'm not really sure that it's all that good. It's basically Hellfire's older brother. It's 2 extra mana and 2 extra damage to everything. But the great thing about Hellfire is actually its cost, and that you can play it very early in the game and still clear a lot of stuff. By the time you get later in the game, to turns 6, for instance, and especially turn 8, Warlock is typically going to have other board clear options that don't also totally sacrifice your own stuff. The problem, of course, with Fel Fire Potion is that it's going to kill your own board just as easily. Now, that's a theme, of course, because Shadow Flame is another more late game clear. It's 4 mana as well, but you need to have a minion with it, so it typically costs more like 6 to 8 mana if you want to get a good minion off. So that's, a mid to late game clear. Also, Twisting Nether is a late game clear. And those sacrifice your minions too. So this kind of seems to live in the same space as both of those cards. It doesn't do anything different or unique, and I would argue it doesn't do anything better. It's cheaper than Twisting Nether, but Twisting Nether is much, much more thorough in how it clears minions, because it doesn't just deal damage, it totally just kills them. Shadow Flame, of course, you only have to sacrifice one thing instead of dealing 5 damage to everything. Plus, this hurts your own health total too, so you risk killing yourself or lowering yourself, which can be a problem with Warlock. There's a lot of ways to regain life, of course, and stabilize at low health, but it's still risky to play a card like this. So I think since it's a little bit slower than Hellfire, it doesn't really fit quite as well into that range of AoE clears that late game control Warlocks are looking for. This occupies the same space as other AoEs, so I don't really know that this is going to be played a ton. That said, it's not a bad card at all. Like, it could be a finisher that kills your opponent. Late game Warlocks don't always have minions, so it's often not going to hurt anything on your side of the board at all. It's definitely playable. I just think it has a lot of competition right now, and feels like it's kind of a halfway between Hellfire and Twisting Nether, but not as good as either one, if that makes sense. So, playable card, but probably won't be played, if that makes any sense. In other words, it's got the pieces to be okay. I think there are just other cards that fit better. So, I don't know, maybe we'll see Fel Fire Potion, though, in really, really, really board control based Warlocks that don't play any minions but just want to kill everything. Who knows? This has some potential as a card, certainly. I will also note, though, that there are some potion cards that draw potions and stuff in the Gadgetzan set, and perhaps some other potion synergy cards we haven't gotten to yet. So we shouldn't only think about this in the context of a Warlock card. It could also just be a potion card, and that might be pretty significant, right? This is a good board clear for other classes, perhaps. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it is in that pool of new potion cards, and will be something you can get off those other potion synergy cards. So that might make it pretty important that it exists, even if it's not widely played in Warlock. Moving on to another potion, guys. It's another potion. This one is the Bloodfury Potion. Another Warlock spell, this time around 3 mana, and it's a buff instead of a damage card. Give a minion +3 attack, so that's its base effect. And if it's a demon, gain +3 health as well. So basically this is a +3/+3 buff card, so the baby brother to Blessing of Kings, the Paladin card, or there's a ton of different Warlock buff cards as well that typically do only demons, right? And this is sort of a halfway in between. It's a +3/+3 if it's a demon. If it's not a demon, of course, you just get the 3 attack. If that's the case, giving a minion +3 attack for 3 mana is really bad. Like there's a lot of effects that do more for way, way less. So Blessing of Might, Cold Blood, a lot of classes have much better buffs than that. So this is only going to be reasonably strong when it's on a demon. That said, we've never seen any of these demon buff cards really take off and see a lot of play. Zoo Warlock is a deck that wouldn't mind buffs on its minions, of course, right? But typically that's achieved through things like Defender of Argus or Power Overwhelming, and Power Overwhelming just in the case to make trades, not to actually have those stats stick around. So there are other cards like minions you'd rather play than Bloodfury Potion. Having that many spells in a zoo deck is problematic, and buffs just don't go that far in control-style Warlock decks, particularly cheaper ones like this. So another card that doesn't seem like it fits any of the really popular Warlock archetypes. But again, even though I don't think this will be played by Warlocks, this does have some important implications just because it is a potion pool card. And there will be those instances where even if you're a mage or a priest, for 3 mana giving a minion +3 attack might not be a bad play at all for a card that you're essentially getting for free or generating from another card. So in that case, that's exactly why this card has the condition instead of just being only for demons. It's because they want it to have value as a potion for other classes, but it's a much reduced value. But still, sometimes that might set up a trade or give you lethal or do something cool. So it's nice that that this card exists and does work for everybody in this particular tri-class of the Cabal. So not a great card. Won't be played by Warlocks, I suspect. But a thoughtful design at the very least. So let's move on to some neutral minions here. Up first is the Backstreet Boys. The Backstreet Leopard. It's a 3 mana, 3/1, and has a death rattle, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. So this is just like a really bad Leper Gnome. You might remember the Leper Gnome pre-nerf was a 1 mana, 2/1 with the exact same death rattle as this card. That was an awesome card, right? It was perfect for aggro decks that wanted to really hit face because it was an aggressively statted early drop that also dealt guaranteed damage essentially to the enemy hero. So that was really, really nice. It was usually like 4 to 6 damage for 1 mana, which is just absurd. This card is not any better. In fact, it's much, much worse because it costs 2 extra mana. The extra attack value is only 1 from the pre-nerf Leper Gnome. Even current Leper Gnome is more efficient because this card only gives you 2 extra attack for 2 mana, which is really, really expensive. Just getting 2 total stats for 2 mana is absurd. So if this was a 3/2, it would make a little bit more sense to me because that would match the stats to value of the effect. But right now, it's very understated for as strong as its effect is, which is not very strong. Like, it's a moderately powerful effect, and you're taking a huge hit on stats. I think a 3 mana 3/2 with this effect would probably be balanced. I don't even think it'd get played a ton, but it'd be balanced. This is way undertuned. Because, by turn 3, there's so many ways to ping off a 1 health minion that this is never actually going to get to attack. So it's going to go out there and it's going to die for free and it's going to do 2 damage to the enemy hero from the death rattle. But if that's all you're going to get, if you're going to play a minion that dies for free and does 2 damage, why not just play the 1 mana Leper Gnome instead, right? Because you're very, very, very unlikely to ever get this to attack or make a significant trade or anything. So understated minion, really not a very strong effect at all, especially considering the cost. And this looks completely unplayable to me in constructed format. And probably even in Arena, it's not going to be that good just because it dies so easily to ping effects and doesn't accomplish much in the meantime. So Backstreet Leopard, you do not influence the board nearly enough to be a playable card. Sorry, bro. And finally, one last card. It is the Bomb Squad, a.k.a. the Sylvanas Killer. This is a 5 mana minion. It's got 2/2 in stats. That's bad for 5 mana, guys. But it has a very, very powerful battle cry. Deal 5 damage to an enemy minion. That's an awesome battle cry. Because essentially this is like almost like a Shadow Strike or a Fireball bundled in with a minion in a single card, which isn't bad at all. So you cast Fireball and you summon a 2/2 for 5 mana. So or you cast Shadow Strike and you summon a 2/2. So it's basically like you're getting a 2/2 for something like 1.5 to 2 mana, which isn't awful, but it's not all that great either, of course. And this card has a downside. Death Rattle deal 5 damage to your heroes. Whoever possesses this card when it dies will also receive 5 damage. Now that's why I called it the Sylvanas counter, because you can essentially, if they play Sylvanas, you play Bomb Squad, kills the Sylvanas, there's a chance Sylvanas steals this card, or a guarantee if it's the only minion on the board, and then you get to kill this really, really crappy minion, this 2/2, and do 5 damage to your opponent. So I think it's just built as a Sylvanas counter. But I just don't think there's enough here, right? Like, compare this to a card like Fire Elemental. It's a battle cry that does 3, you get a 6/5. Like, that's crazy better. Even compared to the Blackwing Corruptor, that's a 5 mana 5/4 that does 3 damage. So this takes a pretty big stat hit, has a very negative death rattle if it hits on your side of the board. So the battle cry is great, but not enough to overcome the stat downside and the death rattle downside. So yeah, it's a good counter to Sylvanas, but who wants to tech in a card just specifically for Sylvanas, and you don't even know that it's going to hit, right? Because you don't know Sylvanas is for sure going to steal it. Like, it's still just 5 damage to your opposing hero. It's not that much. So there's a ton of risk, a ton of unreliability, and just not that much to this card to make it playable in my mind. I think this is pretty bad. Except it might actually be decent in Arena, just because that battle cry is going to be very good in Arena, and it's hard sometimes to get damage clears, like single target damage clears in Arena, because there's not always Fireballs for every class or Shadow Strikes for every class. So this could serve that utility, and taking 5 damage to your hero in Arena is usually not that bad. It's more about establishing the board. So this is kind of the bomb lobber of Arena right now. But even somewhat better, because of course the battle cry is targeted. So Bomb Lobber is a great comparison, and obviously thematically connected to this card. Bomb Lobber was good, but this is worse than Bomb Lobber in many ways, because it's worse stats, and the death rattle is a risk too. So I just don't think this is a great card. I think it's okay in design. Pretty creative and layered, which is nice, and pretty fun thematically, but just doesn't do enough consistently enough to be played. So below average card as far as I'm concerned. So that is going to do it for this particular review. I think this is a good card, great card, average card, weak card, average card, weak card, terrible card, and a weak card. And I'm sure you have some thoughts of your own. You probably disagree with a lot of my comments, and maybe just agree with a few. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's your take on these cards? What decks do you think they'll be played in? Did I miss any crazy cool synergies? I want to hear it all, so leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.